And now the other side of that equation, the other strategic advantage, competitive advantage that firms might have, the differentiation, right? So here you try to do things that your competition does not do. And here, interestingly enough, scale is probably not your friend, right? So for cost leadership, you want to scale up. For differentiation, if you try to be different, scaling up may not necessarily be a good idea. If everybody's wearing the same clothes, it's no longer differentiated, right? So same thing with cars and whatnot. And basically almost anything can be a source of differentiation. Some of those factors are tangible, some intangible. It's kind of hard to say which one is more important, but probably like in many other cases, intangible is more powerful at explaining certain things. So with tangible differentiation, we may think about things like size, shape, color, weight, definitely design, material, and performance attributes. Things like reliability, consistency, taste, speed, durability, safety, and whatnot. With intangible differentiation, again, things are harder to quantify here. So here we talk about social considerations, right? So fair trade coffee. Like, why do you care that coffee farmers who grew the coffee get paid adequately at the end of the day? Right? Aren't you ultimately just after the good taste in coffee? It turns out that many people actually care about fair trade practices and they would willingly pay more uh, to support them. Why do people support companies with some social cause? Right? Sometimes social enterprises, sometimes companies with corporate social responsibility, precisely because of that, right? They want to be part of something larger than themselves. They want to contribute to something meaningful while consuming the products they like. So they do that. Could be psychological considerations, aesthetic considerations, and to a significant extent, things like status, right? So why do you want to wear a Rolex watch? Because it signifies certain status, exclusivity, individuality. You want to be different. And again, remember I said that here scale is not necessarily your friend. Apple at some point was competing truly on differentiation, like be different, think different kind of thing. Right now, you go into a college, probably 70% of students will have MacBooks. It starts definitely to lose this differentiation by becoming mainstream. It goes away from differentiation. So it creates a major challenge for that company, for the way it used to compete in the past. Um, again, it could, differentiation doesn't even have to be about the product as such. It could be about complementary services, like if you buy a car, if the financial arm of the manufacturer offers you 0%, 72-month financing, you would definitely consider it, right? So there are things that companies can do to differentiate away from competition that are not necessarily about the product, that are not necessarily about your experience with the product, but that touch on, almost anything else. And I have here a few examples to show you. So I personally, I drive a Honda, so I like Hondas. If the technology cooperates, that's one of my favorite videos. Let's see if it works. It's an older one. Isn't it nice when things just work? So, right, that's the idea. That's the way they try to position themselves. Things just work. It's not necessarily the luxury of it, it's just consistency, reliability, and some creative advertising. I actually have done some research about this video, and it took multiple attempts, obviously, to make everything work. And this video is, they brought two pieces together because they can never make all of it work at once. But again, the idea is quite nice. And car industry in general is the one where a lot of companies do try to compete based on differentiation. I have some other examples here for you. I know if you can see that well. So Mercedes truck bringing a bunch of BMWs, saying a Mercedes can also bring driving pleasure. So obviously something by BMW, something similar, again from BMW against Audi. Audi strikes back. Subaru trying to emphasize its engine over Audi and BMW. And then, of course, you have Bentley, where words aren't really necessary. All right. So when it comes to differentiation, there are two sides that you have to consider. The demand side, what it is that the customer wants in a product, right? And what it is that's really important to the customer himself or herself. And then also the supply side. How is it that we as a company can differentiate our product? What is it that we can do? Right, so on the demand side, you have to understand the product. What need does it really satisfy? And what are the key attributes of the product? For the customer, by what criteria do they choose? Right, and so there you have to relate patterns of customer preferences to product attributes. And what price premiums do product attributes command? So it's a very important thing, right, to remember that customers may want a number of different things, but they are only willing to pay for some of them. I believe I told you the example about my pilot friend and how his company has tried to do some consumer research in the past, and they asked people which features you want to see in the airline, and they said this, and that, and then they asked which of those would you be willing to pay, and all of a sudden all of that went away. So here's the same idea, right? You try to find what it is that customers want, and what's the premium they're willing to pay for it. That's critically important. You also try to understand what motivates people to make the purchases. What are some of the demographic, sociological, and psychological influences on customer behavior? From that, you try to select product positioning in relation to product attributes, right? We do this, but not that. You try to select target customer group, ensure that the product meets the needs of that customer, and then you obviously, evaluate cost and benefits of differentiation, and you offer them to that group at that price. If you think about what Trader Joe has been doing, he's been very careful trying to understand what the customers want, positioning themselves right, and pricing the product attractively to lure customers in and make them come over and over, right, with some innovation, with changing the products, doing this and that. On the supply side, for differentiation, definitely there are some drivers of uniqueness that we all can think about quite easily. Product features and performance. Complementary service, things like credit or delivery. Back in 2006, when I built my first house, we were just moving in, and it was just an empty house, right? Literally nothing to sleep on the first night. So we went to the store, visited several stores. One of them was ready to get us what we needed, mattresses and I believe refrigerator right away that same day. The price was about right. So we went with them, right? Not because they were necessarily the cheapest, but because they combined it with fast delivery, right? To us at that point, that was important. Intensity of marketing activities. So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all advertising. It can be word of mouth. Again, think about Trader Joe's. They were kind of careful not to go on TV or not to print newspaper ads or anything like that. Technology embodied and design and manufacture. So if something is done sustainably, all of a sudden it matters, right? Even though performance may be about the same, but you kind of care. If something is done from recycled plastic, all of a sudden people would buy that just because. Quality of purchased units matters. Procedures that influence customer experience, skill and experience of employees, location, especially for retail outlets. So all of those things matter. Product integrity, so obviously, right, it has to deliver, but it also has to stand for something. There are multiple dimensions to product integrity. Again, I would refer you to the textbook. Look at it there. Signal and reputation, right? Sometimes by wearing certain item, you signal to the rest of the world that, these are my values. If you wear, I don't even remember what they call those, like smart glasses by Google, I think they may be discontinued, but the idea was that, like you project a certain image. I don't know what you derive from them necessarily, but the idea is, again, right, it's a signal of sorts. And brands, obviously, brands stand for something, and that's important. Now, here we may also think about value chain strategically to identify differentiation potential on the supply side, right? What you can do differently to entice consumers to treat you as a premium product. So with support activities, you may develop the information system that supports fast response capabilities. You may train your employees better to support customer service excellence. You may, in technology development, come up with new products fast and, hopefully some exciting innovation. And at each of the levels of the primary activities, inbound logistics, operations, you work with premium quality products, defect-free manufacturing, fast delivery, efficient order processing. So you try to be quality different, if you will, from your potential rivals. You also, and again, the textbook talks about it in some detail, as you think about the operations, you try to connect them to the operations of your buyers, especially if they're not individual consumers, if they're industrial customers as well. You try to think how you can make their life easier. If they are the ones who also pursue differentiation, then by emphasizing quality and delivery on your end, you improve their ability to deliver on their promise to their customers, right? So you may do that strategically. And in terms of implementing this cost leadership and differentiation strategy, obviously key strategy elements will be quite different. Right? For cost leadership, you emphasize scale efficiency, maximizing labor productivity, design for manufacture, process innovation, as opposed to product innovation, control of overheads, you outsource everything where you cannot get the advantage yourself, things of that nature. Right, for organizational requirements, again, just look at the slide, it's all listed there. With differentiation, you emphasize branding, advertising, design, quality, customer service, and new product development. You much less care about the process, you care about the product, right? So something that ultimately gives you this customer experience, unless you want to appeal to customers based on the qualities of the process you use. Like if you're green, if you recycle, then you definitely emphasize that. And the capabilities, organizational requirements for differentiation strategy are quite different as well, right? So you emphasize marketing, engineering, cross-functional coordination, creativity, research. So you may see how different it feels compared to cost leadership. And generally, I would say that, competing based on differentiation is probably easier than competing based on cost, precisely because there are many ways to skin the cat when it comes to differentiation, right? There are many ways to make it work. Cost leadership is all about efficiency, and it's all about the scale. In fact, right, so with differentiation, scale would not work. The only way for you to grow is to grow by increasing the scope of the company, maybe go into other industries or other markets. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about diversification. But again, differentiation is the enemy of scale, probably a friend of scope. So we'll get back to it later this semester. And then finally, something that your textbook does not really talk about, but that I believe we have to emphasize quite carefully. There is a specific strategic approach that sits right in the middle of cost leadership and differentiation. There are some companies that try to do both. And the textbook suggests that, they are likely to get stuck in the middle. Maybe. There are definitely risks. With a strategy, you may try to overcommit yourself by trying to emphasize all those different things at once. You may get stuck in the middle because, maybe you're going to spread your resources too thin. But at the same time, if you do that correctly, you definitely may carve out yourself a very decent niche. Again, think about Trader Joe's. It's definitely a differentiated player in the market. And it's definitely a lot cheaper than many of its competitors, such as Whole Foods, right? So it does not try to appeal to all the people, right? It still serves a certain segment, but within that segment, it's definitely differentiated, and it is a cost leader. So, there are definitely ways to succeed with this dual strategic advantage. And I would definitely encourage you to think about that. Many examples of this nature you can find like all over the place. I used to live in Northeast Ohio, and Cleveland Hopkins was a major airport. We also had a secondary airport, the so-called Akron-Canton Airport. My favorite airport ever. You can get there 50 minutes before the flight, park just outside for maybe $6 a night, walk to the airport, breeze through security, still have time for breakfast, and fly, hassle-free. And it was a lot cheaper than flying out of Cleveland as well. So the danger for them is they have become more and more popular lately, and more companies try to fly out of there. So as the competition for gates increases, maybe the price for customers will go up as well. But up until now, they have been able to pursue the strategy quite successfully. Think about furniture stores that sell unfinished high-end furniture. It's unfinished, so it's a lot cheaper than what you'd buy, had it been finished by professionals. And it does require some work, so it's definitely not for everyone. It's for a segment, but within that segment, it's definitely cheaper than what you would pay to a fully professionally finished furniture. It still gives you some satisfaction of being able to, do it yourself, kind of thing, and being good quality. So plenty of those stores around, or maybe not plenty, but definitely enough, and they do survive, and they are successful. So even though it's not an easy strategy to pursue, it's definitely the one that I would encourage you to think about. as you consider different options for your own company or wherever you may find yourself in the future. And with that, our session concludes. So thank you guys again. I will post the questions for the case shortly, and we'll talk to you next week.